G'day, Doggies fans, all things Bulldogs. It's episode 30. Got a lot to talk about, so we'll get straight into it. Apologies in advance for any sort of stumbles or, cutouts. The internet's been dropping out a fair bit, so we'll progress and do our best. So we've got the junior reps games starting this week. Harold Matts and SG Ball. We've also got the Lisa Fiola, which has been elevated to a proper competition, and for the young girls, and also Tasha Gale starting as well. So all those teams, courtesy of Zero Tackle. Check that out on the web. Go to All Things Bulldogs Facebook page. I've posted all the teams up as well. We also have Roman Fatala Mariner has left the Bulldogs, as everyone would know, the last remaining player from the 2021 season, completing a full clean out of the roster, which I think is more of a coincidence. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of players moved on. A club like Newcastle in 2016, when it was running last, had essentially, I think, still 5 players remain in 2019 when they were bringing better players to the club. And those players were pretty much all juniors, the likes of the Saifidi brothers and Sione Mataudia. I think his brothers had moved on by then. He still remained. The Dogs made a big play for 3 of them back in about 2015, I think, or 2016. And I think there was Nathan Ross, the winger, and maybe another one, maybe Mitch Barnett. But the point I'm making is that when teams are running last, the majority of the roster gets turned over. It's happened pretty quickly at the Bulldogs. It's a bit of sensationalised news. What they're trying to do is to fast track a situation where they get to basically say that Cameron Serrato and Phil Gould are under a lot of pressure if they don't perform. And look, that pressure's always there for every coach, and that's a reality. However, they're trying to use those wise old cliches that they use as headlines, and the rest of the story just tells itself. So it's basically about a line in the sand. You've recruited this team. This is the team you wanted, and you've got the team that you're after, and that team now needs to perform or else. And we're going to talk about that and how they do that to clubs. There's a podcast called Footy Talk. The latest episode hosted by Adam Peacock. I like Adam Peacock. He's an old Fox journalist who I find is just reports the news pretty much. He's got a really good sense of humor and stuff like that. But he doesn't come across as an apologetic narcissist that you see a lot of these journalists, sort of the way they go about it, from Danny Wheeler to Shamus to Buzz, Paul Crawley, Brent Reed. I find they all take the position that they're almost apologetic in having to report the news that's coming through, and that the news is coming, and everyone else is to blame for the news that gets reported, and they're just doing their jobs. There's pretty much in 38 minutes, they cover quite a bit, and there's a candid look at how coaches need to have allies in themselves, although they sort of speak about it in the third person, which is a really weird thing. They're essentially talking about themselves, but speaking about media in general. And they talk about coaches and clubs that are under the spotlight more due to the whether they have good relationships with certain media or they don't, and that sort of holds the purse strings to whether they can succeed in the face of adversity. Clubs and coaches and players that are really good with the media tend to have less of an issue when it comes to reports and the amount of reports and the amount of leaks and stuff like that are sort of kept under control when those relationships are there and important. And media essentially gets utilised in order to, if you've got good relationships with the media organisation, the club or a coach or someone in that organisation is able to utilise that media effectively to make certain things happen. Phil Gould is probably a good example of that. The Broncos with the Courier Mail are very good at that. People like to sort of suggest that because the Broncos have such a big junior system and a big fan base that demands success and is used to success, that there's a lot more pressure on these players and stuff. I would suggest that they get being, on the stock exchange, being owned by news media, having twice the amount of promotion as all the other Queensland clubs and 3 times the amount of the Sydney clubs in general. They get a really good exposure of everything they do well. There's some actual pretty good journalism when it comes to the Broncos as well, in the fact that it's just reporting of facts and stuff like that. And there's not too much sensationalism. And if they've got players on their roster they want to get rid of for whatever reason, they're able to use the media really well and without much opposition. So it's and one of the players we're going to talk about, Tavita Pangai Jr., as I mentioned in the spiel about this episode, and how that's all the reasons that, to me, he's never playing rugby league again. Well, not for the Broncos in 2024. I 100% believe that. Happy to be wrong about that. If I'm wrong, it doesn't matter. This is just my opinion, and I'll give you the reasons why I come to that opinion, and I've got plenty. And I think if you find yourself as someone who is putting jabs at Tavita Pangai Jr. every time you get a chance, what I suggest is that you're just part of this whole manipulation. You're just very easily manipulated by the media, because any feeling you have, and trust me, we all have a similar feeling about Tavita, that he never realised his potential, and he's made a lot of money out of the game, and he's come out and said some things which are a little bit infuriating for fans of a team like Canterbury that have suffered and are not used to this failure. But you do need to understand he's now in the boxing game and he's utilising media in order to keep him relevant. And that's why he's not charging down all the, dismissing all these comments about him potentially helping the Broncos. And we want to feel validated that he's the villain, because he is highly disliked, just like Phil Gould is highly disliked. People who will sit there and see a Buzz Rockfield article and say, "Get off the grog, Buzz, you're a fool," right? And that's Shark supporters even talk about Buzz. Just because he's a Shark supporter doesn't mean he's not a dickhead. And I feel sorry for Buzz. I shouldn't call him a dickhead. That's a bit disrespectful. But it's one of these apologetic, don't shoot the messenger, I can't help it, I'm just doing my job. And I'm doing it well. I'm just speaking the truth, Tempty. Whatever he fucking is, he promotes himself as the victim. I don't consider someone hanging over a tree ledge taking photos as a victim when it comes to this game. I call that someone determined to create news and manufacture stories so that his boss says, "Good job, you got plenty of clicks, well done." So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, because the Footy Talk podcast, I don't mind listening to Brent Reid and Adam Peacock, and I don't mind we talk about, who's going to come to our club and who's leaving. It's a bit disrespectful to people that are there, but it's part of the game. I get it. this whole off-field, on-field thing, the off-field thing now is just so much, it's just so full of manufactured lies. And I think some of these narcissistic traits that are shown from media individuals like Reed, like Shamus, like Buzz, like Crawley, where they're so, as I said, apologetic, don't shoot the messenger, they can't help it, they're just doing their job. And they start to believe, to protect their own egos, to protect their guilt sometimes, because they must sometimes think about the other side of what their stories can mean. And that's families and online bullying and all that sort of stuff. And, people getting abused for things that never actually happened and the media helped promote it, all that sort of stuff. They protect themselves by forgetting that some of the information they got and promoted wasn't true, and some of it was actually made up, and some of it was made up by themselves, right? A report and a story doesn't need evidence to go ahead. It just has to capture people's attention. That's the deciding factor, and that's been, the entire game when it comes to advertising and, and discussion. Rugby league's become Hollywood in the way that it's promoted. And I don't believe that is always a good thing. I think there's so much opportunity for the NRL and for individual clubs to find these people that actually do a lot of work for nothing to give to people. Like you go and look at ultimate berries to Bulldogs, and and there's a couple of other ones. Berries to Bulldogs. There's a couple of different types of ones, and with people that are very dedicated, and they do all the birthdays of all the past and present players. So you've got Berries to Bulldogs past and present, the history of the Bulldogs. All these people are doing a great job providing fans with, little snippets of our history. There should be a place where that's a single source of truth, where everyone can go, and that's promoted by someone who works and gets paid to promote all this stuff, and then interact on it, and maybe, get people from the past to talk and to let us know about the history and knowledge of the game. Have people talk about the subtle differences in the way the game was played between then and now, and their insights about how it's different and where it's improved or where it's got worse, rather than just, all the bravo talk about the toughness versus the protected species of today, and the footy players versus the athletes and all that sort of stuff. There's a huge opportunity there to talk about. And, Western Suburbs have got a site where it's got basically their entire history. Every club needs that. It should be NRL funded. Shouldn't be down to the clubs to pay for this stuff, unless the clubs are prepared to actually put their investment in. And, the amount of merchandising possibilities from our history and through greatness, there's so much. People will buy and invest in history. I'm not just talking about getting a photo and putting it in a nice frame and getting it signed, and that being all the memorabilia. I'm talking about T-shirts, hats, special jumpers, jackets, stuff from that era, from that time, replicated in today. Can be done. Footballs, you name it. Not just cheap crap, not just stubby coolers, but you'd still include all that stuff. But look, there's lots of things they try and that they do, but they could do so much more. And they don't have to mass produce everything. people are willing to pay for authentic things as keepsakes. I just got these. Josh Shadow car. Printed up. It's got the Nighttime podcast on it, which is part of the deal. It's a good podcast. It's not just about league. They got Karaz. So one of these little babies are going to go. They're going to go to the winner of the Serato comp. Very happy with them, and I don't want to give them away, but I'm going to give one away, at least one. My point is that I just wanted that, no matter what it costed. I wanted it because it looked good. I could put it in amongst my little bulldog shrine, and I'm happy with it. I like looking at it. And there's lots of fans like that. And, watch this space. I'm going to try and look at getting some T-shirts designed and stuff like that. Not for me to make money out of. I'll be getting them designed for myself and show people how they can do that. Whether they go through, and there's a whole bunch of people who are into printing and doing stuff. It costs you more when you're doing it yourself, but if I can get some images and stuff, you might be able to utilise and create your own shirts or merchandise yourself. You can do that. But I'd like the club to be to partner with a couple of printers and then get a gauge on what would people want to get and want to see and how many would they want to buy, and then find a price. You could do that through the online space. And this sort of stuff, and not to mention the amount of advertisers and businesses they could promote from the local area. Like, I know they've done a lot of work on the commercial side of things, and they're kicking a lot of goals. But there's a lot to be desired, whatever the word is. When it comes to the social media space, I think they've got one or two people working on it, it seems. And they're doing the best job they can with limited resources. And I think there's so much more investment they can make to get a much bigger return and much more engagement out of the fans, and not rely on the media to tell us who's under pressure this week and who's moving up and who's moving down. And there's so many predictable things that they're going to say and talk about. If the Cowboys fall under pressure, they're going to say Todd Payton is under pressure. They're already starting to suggest that. They rated that Cameron Ciraldo was a B+ safety rating in the Australian. Now, what's that mean? I thought that was an achievement score. I can't find it now, but maybe I dreamt it. Oh, who knows? But that sounds like a challenge for the media. They've come out and said that Ciraldo and Gould have the side that they wanted. You can't tell if they had the side that they wanted. I can tell you now, it would have either Payne Husson or Tino or both, or Aden Fanua-Blake. It would have Mitchell Moses in it, or Ben Hunt in it, or Jerome Luai. If they got the team they wanted, those players, 1, 2, or 3 of those players would be in our club right now. There's so many players that weren't even an option for Canterbury. Adam Reynolds, yeah. Crystal ball stuff. Adam Reynolds and Sean Johnson. I think we were interested in Johnson. His manager went to speak to Canterbury, but Sean had already overridden him and said, I'm already on my way to New Zealand. I'll be signing there and moving home. Nico Hines was a utility fullback. No one had predicted he would be a halfback. Chad Townsend went to the Cowboys. Big signing to go there. already great juniors coming through, and some really good players. Nice, strong forward pack that had developed and got games under its belt that was ready to strike. And they've spent a bit of money on some players. They've got Lure up there and a few others, like they expect results. They want to be successful. Freed up a lot of cap from Morgan and Jono when they retired. They've got Taumalolo. They're talking about he's a possible option to leave the cap. The point I'm trying to make is that all the star spine players that are sort of actively going on the market, and that, they've either stayed where they are or they've got huge money to leave. Now, Spencer Lanyu's one I felt we probably could have offered him a little bit more money potentially to get him. I think the Dogs felt they had him, and that was one we missed. I think Jerome being offered 1.2 from the Tigers is just too much. We couldn't give him a 5-year deal worth $6 million. It just wasn't going to happen. And, it made sense. But the likes of Kickow, Marnie, Crichton. Marnie's basically told Parra he was going to have a look on the market. A day later, we'd sign him up. Kickow was told by Penrith that we can't offer you $750,000. Again, you probably can make more than that. You're free to look around. A day later, he'd signed with the Dogs, and then there was a picture released which upset the media completely because they didn't get to make all that have that easily written stories of where's he going to land and who's he going to go with, and a Penrith going to try and keep him and all that sort of stuff. And then you've got Stephen Crichton, where the media are allowed to play their games and do their thing back and forth. And Crichton, as much as him as a player probably wanted to stay, he was never staying. And I said that from day one. Likely to be going to the Bulldogs on more money than he could get. Only thing that might have changed if Dylan Edwards, broke his leg and had to retire. That would have kept Crichton there, and they would have paid him an upgrade and kept him in the club. Outside of that, Josh Curran become an opportunity, good signing. Blake Taff not getting a proper chance. Arguably a better fullback than Latrell Mitchell. Not saying he's a better player, and Latrell's huge, and lots of people might laugh at that comment, but I think he demonstrates more of the values you want to see in your fullback and the skill set. We know how dominant Latrell can be, but we also know how absent he can be. And that comes a lot down to fitness. So there's some signings. We like all these signings, 10 new signings this year. We like a lot of them. We didn't like losing Paul Vaughan. We didn't like losing Jake Avarillo and a couple of others, I'm sure. But the fact of the matter is that apart from Stephen Crichton and potentially Josh Curran, every single other player was a player that was looking to get more money or to keep their NRL careers alive and a chance to prove to themselves and prove to the NRL and to the clubs that they are worthy NRL players and fighting for their futures. So to give the old cliche that this is the house that Gus and Cam built, they're trying to accelerate that sort of rhetoric. And it's already being mimicked by fans. A lot of people don't like Phil Gould, so you've got fans of the club and fans outside of the club, most of Queensland. they're going to jump on that ball. People who sit there and say Buzz Rockfield is a liar, but when he talks about Phil Gould, he's suddenly telling the truth about everything, right? So you've got this situation where they're setting us, if the Dogs don't make massive improvement, and they're going to look at their attack, their defence. I think defence would be the major one they look at this year from the commentary. But if they don't score points, and look, that's the same for any club. I get it. But you're talking about a club which has turned over its full roster in a 3-year period. They just can't suddenly gel. I think there's definitely more combinations there. There's people who've played together. Salmon's played with Marnie. Marnie and Burton have been together for a year now. You've got Fox and Burton have been together for 2 years now. Maxi King's been there for 2 years. You know, there's some combinations emerging. Carraz, would have been nice to see Carraz and Averillo keep that partnership going. Now we've got Bronson in, we've got Semrani coming through, who's untapped. We've got Blake Wilson and Skelton. Like, there's a lot of talent there. Stephen Crichton joins the fray. But to gel and to work together takes repetition, it takes trust, and the trust has to be built through working together. And when it's under sufferance, that's when it evaporates, and that's when things happen. And that's when we'll concede points. What's going to be interesting for the Bulldogs to sort of fly under the radar or keep the media off their back is they need to be able to, for me, is to not throw the game away when they're trying to fight back, when they've let in a couple of tries and then, you know, the Hail Mary plays, which work sometimes. But most of the time they're low percentage for a reason, because the percentage of times that they work is pretty low. And that's what I found that the likes of Marnie and Burton did. As leaders of our club, they didn't lead us to grind our way out of trouble, to forget about the scoreboard, and to try and just work our way back into it. And as the season progressed, they found it much harder to do that. We scored some really nice tries. We had some moments where we looked fantastic. But the problem is, I think Canterbury, if they grind, they just keep working hard. If the losses come, but they're closer losses, it's an improvement. So for me, the measure of success, and the only measure that I'd be looking at, is the difference of for and against. And then you've also got to take in the circumstances. How many injuries did that have? Who was available to be picked? Who was being picked? All that sort of stuff. Now, if we've got a discrepancy of 300 points again or 250 points again next year, even that's an improvement, being minus 250. It's still not good enough. And the drums will be beating. And Gus and Cameron, with their supposed team that they want, will be under the chopping block. And News Corp will make a real go of cancelling those two people from the Bulldogs organisation. And that's another thing, going back to the Footy Talk, before I get on to TPJ. They come out and said, hey, a coach needs to have allies. So someone like Ricky Stewart has plenty of allies, so he flies under the radar. And then when he shows his emotion, they like that as well. But, you know, if the phone rings, he picks it up. If they send him some texts, he replies with some texts. You know, he knows how to manage that side of things. Whereas, and he feeds them so many headlines with putting stuff on the referees, right? Plus, they talk about that, and this is a reality, but doesn't mean it's right. And then they were talking about Madge Maguire when he let his results do the talking on the field, but apparently didn't make connections well enough with the media. Well, he talks on SEN every Monday. Well, he was last year. I think that's pretty connected. But anyway, so they're saying they hold the purse strings of the success and failure of these coaches, because that discussion in itself, are we sacking the coach or keeping the coach, is one of the most engaged storylines for people to read and to talk about. Is that the media organisation's fault, or is it the fans' fault? Obviously, there has to be some discussion about it. But the problem is the conjecture and the lies that are created by the media in order to stir the shit. That's the problem. And they need to be accountable for it. Right? It's funny because, and this will lead me to TPJ in a moment. In 2021, the Broncos lost 46-0 to the Rabbits at home. Tavita Pangai Jr. was interviewed after the match. Jonathan Thurston said, and then Danica was reporting, and it had been reported all day. The CEO has confirmed that they're allowing you to go on the market and look elsewhere and get out of your contract. And Tavita was visibly upset and said, well, obviously contracts mean nothing these days, yada yada, and he'll be looking to sort it out as quick as he can. They've only got one game in the next 4 weeks. The coach at the time was Kevin Walters. The CEO and the club wanted him gone. Players weren't happy about it, like Alex Glenn and his mates Payne and Carrigan and the like. And yeah, they utilise their media position. And because Channel 9 don't own the Broncos, Broncos are owned by News Media. News Media would own all the teams and the entire competition if it wasn't for people like Phil Gould, Ken Arvison, old Bobby Fulton, right? That's why they hold Gould accountable, and that's why he's attacked. And that's another thing that they said on Footy Talk, that Penrith are on the nose of News Corp because Phil Gould worked it. And when Phil Gould resigned, Fletcher, the CEO at the time, said it was probably a good thing because News Corp might get off their back now. And, there's a lot of, we used to hear about Queensland Police. Rodney Rood wrote a song about it, about the pigs. Queensland is touted as a racist state for a very long time. It still might be in some areas, but there's not much of an appreciation of the Penrith sort of area and demographic when it comes to Queensland and the Queensland papers. You can see that in the articles that they do and who they do them on. They don't like the gangster look, as in the rappers and stuff, and people having fun and talk, doing peace signals and whatever else. No matter how religious they are, the Courier Mail and its readership aren't into that, right? That's it. That's in it in a nutshell. They don't like Phil Gould because he stopped them from owning the game. Cost them heaps of money, right? So these guys on Footy Talk, Brent Reid and Shamus, said that Serrato was warned not to go to Canterbury because he'd be a target from the News Corp media. So they're talking truth, they're talking reality, but it shouldn't be a reality, right? And it's this whole villain mentality. Gould's a villain that people want to see fail. Tavita Pangai Jr. is a villain. Now, can he play rugby league and maintain a boxing career at the same time like Paul Gallen could? Paul Gallen was hated by Queenslanders. But one thing none of them would say is that he was a quitter or gave up. They might say he was overrated. He got the ball in his hands too much and whatever else. And in his boxing career, he fought everyone he could and beat them all pretty much, except for one or two. Right? And he could still nearly play 80 minutes late into his career. They look at Tavita as someone who's bigger, stronger, probably more ability, more talent, who's paid just as much, if not more, and threw it all away. And then on his way out, he said he was asked if he loved the game of rugby league. He said he never loved it. All right? And I don't care. I know why he's saying that stuff. He's trying to promote how much he loves boxing. He's trying to he's following the same methodology that Anthony Mundine follows. Both men heavily religious. Both men love their families and are very good, kind people outside of all the hoo-ha. Tavita knows that if he wants to get views and eyes on him, he has to stay relevant. And that's why this story exists and why he hasn't shut it down. Right? So when they're sitting there looking at this, right, he turns up to training at the Broncos, probably knowing that it's going to create spark. When he left, they all said he'd be back, and he'd be back for the Broncos or back for the Dolphins, maybe the Titans. Don't know how they could fit him in. Don't know how the Broncos could fit him in. You know? I'll tell you what, and then old Bedell sees Tavita down there. Then the next story is about Carrigan saying, I'd love to be able to play. He's one of my best mates, him and Payne, and we're all really good friends. I'd love for us to be able to play together again. Then Pete Bedell says, the reason they were there is him and his manager are having a meeting with the Broncos to talk about the possibility of Tavita after his second fight making a cameo role to help the Broncos in their run towards another grand final, semi-final series, hopefully a premiership. This is the club, same coach, same club that sent him on his way, which turned out good for him. He got to go to the Panthers. They won the comp, and he played well off the bench. He was utilised really well. Before getting injured, couldn't play the grand final. But this is a player who just said that he never loved the game of rugby league, was sort of forced to play it. Parents shouldn't force the kids, yada, yada. And then he hated little men telling him what to do. And look, this has created a whole discussion point. You got all these people like Corey Parker talking about the romance of how Tavita, with his experience and his size and his ability, just coming on a concentrated effort to help the Broncos at low cost in their cap. It's a smart business decision. He hasn't done the preseason. He hasn't got any combinations with them. Obviously, he played a lot of games with some of their experienced players and their leaders now. I get that. He's going to have Adam Reynolds telling him what to do. The other thing he said is he doesn't like having to train when clubs tell him he has to train. He likes to train when he wants to train, real early in the morning, in the dark of the morning, before the sun comes up, Well, he's not going to be able to do that if he goes back to the Broncos, is he? Look, and this is what people who are saying, no, they can't let him come back. It's a stupid idea. The whole fact of the matter is, it's not even an idea. No, the Broncos don't want it. Tavita doesn't want it. And I'm happy to be wrong about it. And if I am, so what? I'm fucking wrong. If I've offended anyone, I'm sorry you're offended. But we're all just caught hook, line, and sinker because it validates our opinion that he is a villain. who's overpaid and underdelivered, especially for Canterbury, who walked away, who was a quitter, all in some ruse so that he could go back to the Broncos. Sorry, but just because your opinion's validated that he was no good and he wasn't going to help the Bulldogs out of trouble, even though there was a period there when he got selected for Origin, and in the first 20 minutes before that offload, looking fantastic. Yes, we had hope, and then it all fell away. Then he was cut, and the rest is history. But it was all just a big ruse. On the day after he announced it, and it was stated in the media straight up, Tavita's walking away from his contract. He's playing at the end of the season, so he gets paid for 2023, but he's not going to be paid at all for his 2024 contract because he won't be with the club. Severance, zero payout. Straight away, Hooper says, "No, that's bullshit." And then they come up and they made it up that the Bulldogs will be paying $250,000 to Tavita in 2024, and it was all done so they could have $500,000 spare in the cap for 2024. A cap that just went up $2.5 million, where we just let go of Luke Thompson on 800 and a whole bunch of others. Alamotti on 300, Avarillo on over 300, Waddell on 250, right? Braden Burns on over 200. Let go of a heap of money. And who did we sign? We upgraded Burton. We bought in Crichton for the price of a Thompson. Curran comes in, and we get all these young fellas on 250. No longer playing for 450 for Delamatini Zalesniak. Only player we're paying is 150 for Kotrick for the next year or two to play elsewhere. Flanagan was on $500,000. He's gone. RFM's gone now, who's on over 400. Right? Josh Jackson, we had to pay most of his salary in our cap last year. Not paying this year. Not paying Corey Allen $500,000 or half of his wage that we were paying last year for him to go to the Roosters. A lot of money saved. And we got spare change, is what I'm saying. Especially with Tavita. Tavita's salary is basically almost, we've got at least $1 million spare. And to satisfy the NRL, we're going to have to probably front load contracts this year as well, and that'll free up more space to make a play for some props. 4 props that are all off contract, far from the squad that you can't say that's the squad that they want. There's an opportunity there for people to force their way in, yes, but then they haven't taken a punt on all these players, or they would have already extended them. And some of them they may just have to re-employ simply because out of necessity. Why would Kevin Walters, going back to Tavita, risk? First of all, why would he take away a position in the top 30 away from one of the 13,000 kids who all they want to do is play for the Broncos, who all have fought so hard to get that opportunity to be in the running for a top 30? So much depth in every position. Why would he take away a position from a player like that, or take away a position from a journeyman potentially, who's worked their ass off to and playing well enough, contributing well enough to have an opportunity to be in the Broncos top 30? Why would they take that away to give to someone who said that they never loved the game, was forced to play it, who walked away, who said it, all those things that he said, who gave his allegiance back to New South Wales after saying he loved Queensland earlier on? Look, I like Tavita, and I hope he does well in boxing. But the only reason this exists is because it makes his name relevant, makes him a villain. People are going to pay money to watch him lose. Just that's how they made Anthony Mundine a millionaire, out of hatred. And Mundine and Green, behind the scenes, the Aussie hero versus the spoiled, outspoken brat that no one liked. Mundine made more money out of boxing than Danny Green. And beat him. So there you go. Who saw that coming? Both really good blokes off the field. Savito, another great bloke off the field. Keeps to himself. He's not that outspoken, but he's got to be to promote his boxing career. And that's why this exists. And just because the media validates our opinion that he's a villain and an underachiever, overpaid, doesn't mean we should be, we should keep this story running. So that's my thoughts on that. Tyrell May. This is one part of the media we'll never be able to get over. It'd be much better if it was more honest. And look, signings, as we've seen, they can go pear-shaped. Look what happened with young Volkman. It was announced that he was at the club, wasn't even registered. So maybe there's a good reason dogs don't, say they're with us until the cooling off period's done and it's registered with the NRL. Maybe that's a good thing. Taylan May has apparently separated from his player manager. We know that Tyrell and Taylan, they want to play together. The Bulldogs are a chance to get him. I think Taylan's not a bad signing at all for the right price. A very talented outside back. The only concern for me is that, I don't know about Tyrell, but Taylan and Tyrone, if he's in the picture as well, have both had major injuries with their legs. And but they're all different body types. Taylan, I think, adds a lot of depth to our outside backs, and we need Tyrell. We already have depth in our outside backs, though. I get that. And who do we let go? And that's one of the things they've got to weigh up. Both very talented players. Tyrell's not going to be enough on his own, though. We need another big forward to emerge out of our club, whether it's this year in our first grade squad or from a lower grade. And we need potentially another signing to come in that's good, like a Hamlin ULA, for instance. Or a side B. It just has to happen. I'm very happy that Tyrell May looks like he could be definitely coming to the Dogs. There's lots of whispers around about that, not just in the media, from different people. Everyone seems to know someone they don't know. So there you go. Hopefully Tyrell May's coming. We just need, it's not so much a kill, but we just need to increase the depth in our front row. And the good thing is that I think there's enough front rowers in the system. Sorry, in our top 30, I don't think there's enough front rowers in it. So we could actually keep the players we have, because none of them are on huge money from what I can tell. And add someone like Tyrell May to the picture and, take from another area in the team. That's pretty much it. So check out that Footy Talk podcast. I think it's a fair bit of candid stuff in there, as narcissist as I believe it is. Essentially, admitting that the coaches need really strong relationships. And look, strong relationships helps everyone. We get that. It's not what you know, it's who you know. We all know that, right? But really, my issue is the amount of lies they create to add extra pressure, to create a narrative. And the fact that they will do that more often to a coach, because that coach doesn't have great relationships with them, is wrong. And look, they'll never admit to their sources being fake, or that anything that they print is a lie. They'll never admit to it, but it is. You know, all these talk shows, radio included, that need to promote their advertisers, they talk about these things with a lot of people knowing that it's not true. And sometimes they don't even want to know if it's not true. Like, they don't care. They just talk about it. I just think it'd be better if we heard more from ex-players and commentators about how these plays work, and, you know, how play 1 relates to play 5. Not just looking at the Hollywood plays, but how did they build to that Hollywood play over a number of sets? What were the key things, so that you can sort of see that sort of evolve in a game. You go, oh, they're in the right parts of the field, they're getting here. But you can just sort of sense how your team is breaking another team down, or being broken down, and where it needs to improve. Like, all this sort of stuff. There's some great people out there, the rugby league writers. They do really good analysis on how things are broken, and break it down bit by bit to see how things eventuate in both positive action and areas where teams fail as well, and how they are exploited. Like, plus all the history and everything like that. There's so much that can be done. But we sit there, and the media just continue to rely on, in this 24-hour cycle, you know, manufactured rubbish and storylines on heroes and villains, and the people like Phil Gould, people like Tavita Pangai Jr. You know, one thing they said about Phil was this is what Brent said. So Chamis basically said News Corp have it in for Phil Gould and any club he's been with. Slight grants from Brent Reid, but he said that Gus's antics brings it on himself. And I'm like, well, Gus has just been Gus, and he always has been Gus. I don't think that the antics are there to to upset people. It's just who he is. And I can say that about a lot of people. But it doesn't give a news organisation the right, because he's got semantics to do stories that are untrue, or just opinion-based stories presented as fact, which is what it is a lot of the time. And if Matthew Maguire doesn't answer every text message that he sent, or doesn't say that he wants to, give information, why should that make him a bigger target over someone who shares a lot of information, provides a lot of stuff for the news organisation? Why should he? Why should that person be a protected species? It's like organised crime in a way. Well, we've got your back. You've got our back, sort of thing. And I get it, that's how the world works, and I've said that before, but is it a necessary evil in the off-field part of our game? I don't believe it is. I think the off-field can be done a lot better with investment. And I know when you talk about investment, you've got to invest in pathways and kids and all that sort of stuff first. But this is how you get engagement. And the online space has huge opportunities that aren't being utilised. And there's so many different clubs and organisations which are underfunded, which have people doing 1,000 different roles. and not getting really anything, not getting enough out of it, to be honest, for the level that they contribute on a work sense. But yeah, it's like they want to create everything out of gambling revenue. It's all about stats and gambling and all this sort of stuff, because that's where a lot of their funding's coming from. And all these stories which promote lies and division, just like it does in Hollywood, just like it does in politics, that's where they get their engagement from, where issues that people can be divided on. I just think it's a lot better when people are divided on, whether they're going to beat the team they're playing, and the fan banter and stuff like that. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. Anyway, I've talked too much about it. The media are very candid now about their role in things, and that being the case, knowing that they essentially have to be the middlemen between the success and failure of some clubs, players, and whatever else. And the fact that they deliberately do multiple stories on some clubs and leave other clubs alone suggests to me that the journalistic integrity isn't there, which is important to me. And it's creating instability in clubs, especially targeting Sydney clubs, which are struggling. And look, Phil Gould was brought to the Bulldogs because it stopped us being attacked on both fronts. I have the only real sort of thing that I've disliked from Channel 9 or the Sydney Morning Herald is the way they went at Josh Addo-Carr. But you'll look at the relationships the Bulldogs have now. We've got Darcy McDonald at Fox, which helps. You've got Kosenko and even Danny and Shamus to a pretty high degree. Shamus is still defending Phil Gould, although Phil has gone at him a couple of times. Michelle, just forgot her last name, got her on my friend list. But yeah, her on Channel 7 has a huge relationship with Canterbury as well. So, there's lots of relationships there. And that is helping the Dogs get on with business. A lot of positive stories on Channel 9 about the Dogs, especially in the major news bulletins. This sort of stuff wasn't happening. Michelle Bishop is her name, sorry. So yeah, these relationships obviously are important for clubs, and they utilise them to help themselves. I'm sure it was utilised to give the impression and get the support of most of the people on the coach's side that he's trying to bring toughness and discipline to a club that doesn't have it, right? So we've used the media in that sense. But now we're sort of getting attacked only from News Corp. But it's funny, whichever store, News Corp and Channel 9 just put themselves a lot of the time on the opposite side of the story when it comes to the Bulldogs. There's always a division there between those two. With many other clubs, they present a very similar sort of tone either side. And it's so it shows you, Shamus is right. When it comes to the Bulldogs, News Corp have it in for Phil Gould, so they have it in for the Bulldogs. But previously, our demographic, as I've said before, opened us up to a lot of speculation and humiliation from both sides of the media. And that, luckily, isn't as bad from Channel 9 and Sydney Morning Herald anymore. All right. Finding it hard to stop rambling on, but we've gone for an hour. Thanks to everyone who supported the channel, and look for 37 days till we play again. couple of weeks to our trials. Our junior reps are started this week. It's all happening. So can't wait for it all to go ahead. Take care. Go the Dogs.